was to have 20 lots, 16 feet by 32 foot, with an alley of 6 foot in between. The Board of Commissioners ordered that the use of said burying ground be for the use of any person or persons who may think proper to bury in regular order therein. And it is further ordered that the agent for Wells County sell to any person a lot for $10. Notable pioneers buried in the cemetery are R.C. Bennett. His gravestone is partially buried, and you'll be hearing more about him today. Erastus Bascom, he was the first treasurer of Bluffton and under the Angel administration, and you'll be hearing more about Erastus today. Dr. Crosby, you will be hearing his story also. David Angel, who was the first mayor of Bluffton, was portrayed by Mayor Ellis in the 2015 Fairview Cemetery Walk and is buried here. There also was a gypsy woman who died while her family was moving through the area and simply buried at the old Bluffton Cemetery. So I would like to introduce Alan Doherty. He is going to be portraying Robert Collins Bennett.
I'm Robert Collins Bennett. I was born in Virginia. It was the best colonial state in America at the time. But you can call me RC, everyone does. I died October 18th, 1859, according to my grave marker in Old Bluffton Cemetery. My age of 53 for the 1950 census indicates I was born in 1798. Not the 1787 some claim. I lived in a substantial farm near New Lancaster with Elizabeth, she being 17 years younger, and from New York. Our William, age 5, had already been placed in school in 1850. His brother Joseph was only 2. Henry and Katharina Miller lived nearby. They couldn't read nor write. They constantly claimed they birthed the first white child. Their Elizabeth was 17 in that 1850 census, making her born about 1834. They always shoot away reminders that their neighbors to the west, over the Wabash River, Alan Norcross had birthed a girl a few years before Miller's arrived. Norcross was the first man to buy land in Wells County. I joined Norcross as an early Wells County pioneer. I served on the first County Board of Commissioners after being elected to the office in June of 1837. I served alongside Solomon Johnson and James Scott. Only about a dozen votes were cast in that election. My Bennett log cabin home became the location of the first court held. So you could also say that my home was the first courthouse. Alan Norcross served on the jury for that case. Later, I and Abram Studebaker donated land for the establishment of a new town to be the county seat, including the land for today's courthouse. Jointly, we added $270 in cash. We really wanted Bluffton to be the county seat instead of Murray. In March 1838, the town site was surveyed. 191 original lots were laid out, complete with a Bennett Street. A centennial edition of the local newspaper wrote in it, "It wasn't until 1838 that Bennett, standing on a bluff which affects a bend in the Wabash River, saw the advantage of the location for a town, and from its situation gave Bluffton its name. Now I might have suggested Blufftown. They heard it as Bluffton, so Bluffton it is. The mix-up might have been caused by the free whiskey that was being passed around during the voting and the business part of starting Bluffton in Wells County. My first Wells County land buy was in Harrison, section number 3, on August 29, 1834. I bought 101.5 acres. Then the next day, in section 4, I added 56.4 acres. That part was where the ground came from for a donation to start Bluffton. You know, land on the bluff side of the river. Land originally sold for $1.25 an acre. Seemed a wise investment. Why, land prices could rise above $2. Abram Studebaker began buying up land in 1835. He wanted to place sons on his land to start businesses. In 1840, I built a combination saloon, hotel, a stagecoach stop with shops. It was on the southeast corner of Main and Market. I called it Exchange Hotel. It was later purchased by the town's first saloonist, Almond Case, after his log structure burned. My building had actually been intended as a residence, but it evolved. John Studebaker started a log trading post across the intersection, which evolved into his banking business. My hotel also was removed beginning in 1888 to build brick structures, starting with the Wells County Bank. Exchange Hotel had many a fun story remembered in a book, apparently with just a very few copies yet available for purchase in this place. The book title, Edward Bruce Williamson, Bluffton History, fills in those details. The author told me he'd give me a place to rest my head and some food and drink if I mentioned the book today. And showed up later at his house. Harriet Dean had been a bride on March 4th, 1847, with a ceremony performed by Justice of the Peace David Bennett. Her husband, like me, also named Robert Collins Bennett, was buried in Elm Grove in 1875 after living 50 years. He lies buried alongside Harriet after she lived on into the new century. My son, Robert Collins Bennett Jr., born in 1874 and died in 1921, was buried in Fairview. Every cemetery deserves a Robert Collins Bennett burial. I married Elizabeth DeWitt, April 15, 1847, in Wells County, by Justice of the Peace Nelson Kellogg. I missed the event due to my own death, wait, that didn't sound right. I didn't miss my own wedding. In 1895, I missed our daughter's third wedding. Virginia Blue, then age 36, again married, this time to John Lance. As I best recall, with a reminder from Family Search, William Henry was my firstborn in 1844. Joseph came along in 1849. He married Alvina Johnson 2 decades later. David, birthed in 1849, didn't live long. James Blue married our Virginia, previously mentioned. She born in 1851. Next came Cordelia, who yet lived for the 1860 census at age 8. My Robert Collins Jr. arrived in 1855 and married Ella Jane Christman in 1884. Again, that was a child's marriage long after my death. Thomas came in 1856, Reuben in 1857, and then Harriet in 1859 completed my children. I'm kind of proud of young Harriet, whom I never really got to know due to my death only about 2 months after her birth. She married well to Peter S. Green, who for years operated a flour mill here in Bluffton. If you kept up with all those dates, you will know that Elizabeth had been my last spouse, not my first. Now, I gotta get and find that author guy who promised me food. I've been laying in my grave without a bite to eat for 166 years.
Thank you, Ellen. Next, we're going to have Erastus Kent Baskin. I would suggest not choosing that particular name for your next child or grandchild, but Larry McAfee is going to tell us a little bit more about Erastus.
Erastus Kent Baston, because I don't know, I don't know whether to come up with that first name, but I'll tell you before I start, it's awful hard for a 76-year-old man to look like a 27-year-old. So I done my best, because he actually died at 27. This was actually taken from a March 16, 2016 reunion of the Baskin. It's called the Baskin Reunion Association and Baskin Genealogy. They still have reunions today, that family. And this was originally written by one of Erastus' nephews. I was the son of Linus and Jane DeVoe Gray Baskin. I was born on the 13th of August, 1825 in Greenville, Darke County, Ohio, and died the 23rd of October, 1853 at Bluffton, Indiana. There is little written about my formative years, but I conclude that I grew up and received basic schooling in Darke County, Ohio. I went on to study law and become a lawyer. I moved to Indiana and married Sarah Jane Stetler on the 14th of August, 1846. Our children were George McDowell Baskin, born in 1846 in Richmond, Indiana, and Charles Erastus Baskin, born in 1849, most likely in Bluffton. Most of the information about my life was during a period of years between 1850 and 1852. I will put in there that these two children, one was 4 and one was 6 when he died at 27, when their father died. And I was unable to find, but they're both of them are buried. The two sons are both buried in Winchester. So We're assuming, couldn't find anything about his wife, assuming that that she probably moved back with some of the original family members in Winchester after he passed away up here. You have to realize that at this time, 1850, 1852, Bluffton was not far from the primitive backwoods town that was founded in 1838 in a swamp. It was still prone to flooding from the Wabash River. Malaria and other diseases were not uncommon. The town was incorporated in 1851, so I'm writing about a completely different Bluffton than you see today. I was a close friend of George McDowell, an architect and builder, as evidenced by the name of his firstborn son, George McDowell Baskin. Conversely, George McDowell named his first son Erastus Baskin McDowell. Wouldn't you love that? In 1848, George started partnership with me and purchased the first drugstore in Bluffton. George and I knew each other as we both grew up in Greenville, Ohio. I was interested in politics and public service. I was elected as a representative of Wells and Adams County to the Indiana State Constitutional Convention. The purpose of this convention was to revise the Constitution that had been drawn up when Indiana was granted statehood in 1816. I attended sessions from October the 7th, 1850, till February the 20th, 1851. I was appointed to the executive committee, and transcriptions of the convention show that I took a very active part in the revision debates. There were 150 delegates present from around the state. I was the prosecuting attorney of Wells County before 1850. In 1851 to 1852, I was first treasurer of the newly organized town council. In December of 1851, I was employed for a while as an assistant to S.S. Mickle, president of the Indiana Senate. October of 1852, I and some other men founded the Oddfellows Lodge. I don't know if any of you are members of that. They founded the Oddfellows Lodge. I was elected the Noble Grand, their leader. February 11th, 1851, the General Assembly of the state of Indiana allowed me and others to incorporate the Bluffton Band. And we were allowed to receive donations in money and purchase or sell property, musical instruments, or books as long as the value of the sum did not exceed $500. Now you'll want to listen to this part. This is kind of an interesting one. See how this fits with today. It says, after my experience as an assistant to Mickle, I decided to run for the Indiana legislature as a representative from Huntington, Wells County. At this time, a couple of insulting letters were written about me to the editor. These slanderous letters tried to cast aspersions upon my character. In August of 1852, one writer charged that I was a political pop gun who was too lazy to make a living at home. A particularly vicious letter was written by a person who signed his letter, Yaller-Coated Deputy, PM standing for Postmaster. He called me a knight of the corner and bar rooms, a half asleep, half awake, dirty and contemptible, too lazy to keep flies off my face, fool or rascal political renegade. They were just a few of the milder insults. The charge of political renegade comes from the fact that I was a Whig when we lived in Ohio, but when I came to Democrat Wells County, I changed parties. He never had a chance to run for legislature, because I died October the 21st, 1853, at the young age of 27. I can find no clue why I died at such a young age. It's plain to see that when one looks at all of the charges against me by a few radicals, it could not be true. Any questions about him?
Okay, thank you, Larry. Ben Jones. Ben is going to portray Dr. Thomas H. Crosby. Thank you.
First of all, I always wanted to be an officer, so here I am today. I was always an enlisted man. Dr. Thomas H. Crosby was born just southwest of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on the 2nd day of April, 1818, which interestingly enough was about a half an hour from where I was born. When he was 4 years old, his family moved to a small town just north and east of Columbus, Ohio, and I moved to a little town just north and east of Columbus, Ohio. It's kind of interesting again. By the time he was 27 years old, he had graduated from the Cincinnati Commercial School and had obtained a doctor's degree in medicine from the Cincinnati College of Medicine, the oldest medical school in the United States. Dr. Crosby and his wife, which unfortunately I don't know her name, I couldn't find out